The torpedo that sunk the Cheonan and took the lives of 46 South Korean sailors was fired by a North Korean submarine.
Homefront is a very interesting game. First of all, this is a first-person shooter, which already tells you a lot about the game. This is also a war game, which yet again would tell you a lot about it as well. But this is presented a little differently from your typical Call of Duty. Everything about Homefront is a little different, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. The story is quite simple. It's 2027. Korea has invaded the US and a war has started, and you're in the middle of it all. You play as Jacobs, a guy who wakes up in his apartment and is taken by Koreans who send him to a camp. Kind of similar to the Holocaust. Anyway, during your bus ride, BAM! And you have escaped, thanks to the help of Connor and the Resistance. The reason you were saved? They need your help. So you progress with them to the destination they are headed to. And of course there is a lot of people to kill halfway through, and even after. Along with the Resistance and Connor, you have Rihanna and Hopper that accompany you throughout the single player. All three of them are very likeable characters, but not lovable. Despite the fact that Connor is an asshole sometimes, he is easily the favourite. My guess is because he's just plain awesome. The pacing of this game is actually quite good, despite its very short campaign of 5 hours or less. There are only 7 chapters in Homefront, each of them taking about half an hour to complete on normal difficulty, with the exception of the final chapter, which takes a lot longer. This isn't a game you would want to play more than twice, but there is enough replay value to play a possible third time. The gameplay is very similar to any other first-person shooter. Shoot some guys, move along and follow some people to your destination, or on rare occasion, lead yourself to the destination, completing objectives, pretty simple gameplay mechanics. This of course gets boring after a while, but thanks to the very short single player, this doesn't get too boring. There are some really cool explosions and stunts to go along with the gameplay, and just other gameplay mechanics that, well, go wrong. When you destroy a turret by throwing a grenade, the explosion that follows looks nicely done. This also applies with helicopters and, well, people. But the problem is that the friendly AI is very slow to react at times when moving up to the next objective. This happens throughout the entire game and it's very frustrating. Another big part of the gameplay, single player and multiplayer, is the vehicles. You can drive helicopters and shoot turrets from tanks, or drive them in the multiplayer, and even take control of a remote control attack drone. But the problem with that is that you can only aim where you want it to shoot. You can't actually take control of it. The vehicles in this game have been done very nicely, and it's very fun to use in single player and multiplayer. The environments in this game look okay. Nothing special, but they do look good. The graphics, not so much. They're nothing special, noteworthy, but just nowhere near great. The multiplayer maps look better than the single player maps. Despite the fact that the multiplayer maps are based off the single player, they're still better. But just because the maps and graphics aren't good, it doesn't mean what happens within them is bad. The horrible near future is shown with great effect, and it's done impressively by Chaos, and it gives the backstory a very dark feeling. The music in the game is original and great. The main theme is awesome, and the whole soundtrack is really worth something. But I find all war games music to be great. The voice acting isn't the best, but the cast was chosen correctly. All the characters sound realistic and feel real. They react to the situation as they would in real life, and it's done in good quality.
They're Americans, Connor. I didn't sign up for this.
The actors have done their job. There isn't much replay value to Homefront in terms of single player. After the short 5 hours it takes to beat Homefront, there are many trophies to go after. Most of them in single player, which includes passing missions on the hardest difficulty or passing them without dying once. Some others include finding these newspapers. There are 61 newspapers to find in the game where you can read about the backstory of the game. But only finding about 5 in my first playthrough, I think you're going to have to look for them and not just hope to run into them later. The default difficulty setting is normal. Along with that is easy, hard and gorilla, which shouldn't take too long to beat, judging from the 5-hour playthrough on normal. This is really all the single player has to offer, which should take a couple of weeks to complete, but you then have a much expanded multiplayer mode. The multiplayer is much more expanded than the single player, with many unlockables, levels, and customizable perks, weapons, and much more. This multiplayer is very fun. The maps look great, better than the single player, and the vehicles are very fun to play around with. It's very reasonable how many kills you need to unlock these vehicles. One thing that is annoying about the multiplayer is something that isn't even in-game. Every new copy of Homefront features a code to get the full multiplayer experience. Without the code, you miss out on maps and getting past the level cap of 5. This code seems completely pointless and a waste of time for customers, but that has nothing to do with the multiplayer experience, it's the developers. With over 70 levels and many things to try out, the multiplayer more than makes up for its lack of single player content, and it's much more fun. Homefront is something worth trying. The single player is enjoyable and the multiplayer is big and great. But with the lack of replay value and unique gameplay, this feels a little cheap. But it's all worth it for the multiplayer. Stay tuned for my playthrough of the Homefront single player and multiplayer right here on Mecha Gamer 1006.